Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is LeFlore. I'm currently at Stonehill College, and I'm going to share a little bit about my doctoral research from Botswana on human-lion conflict. Is it okay? Is that better? All right. I'll share a little about my doctoral research from Botswana on human-lion conflict. We were able to establish some mitigation strategies, and I'll briefly touch on those and share a little more about the human perceptions around the conflict as well. And so I'll happy to answer more questions about the conflict mitigation strategies afterwards, but we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to keep rolling. As you've probably seen through some other talks, lion distribution and population has shrunk over recent history, and they're in decline throughout Africa, and the population is now hovering around 20,000 individuals. Human-carnivore conflict, human-lion conflict is a major driver of that decline. I'm going to direct you guys to the southern portion of Africa and to actually the largest population in southern Africa in the Okavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. And my study area is actually in the southern portion of the Kaza Transfrontier Conservation Area in the Okavango Delta. So I'm just going to keep zooming in here to the study area to give you a frame of reference. And my study area actually lies north of Maremma Game Reserve and in the eastern panhandle of the Okavango Delta, east of Saranga. And so these lions exist entirely outside protected areas, and as you'd expect, come into contact with people. And study area has one major road, and we focused our efforts in four communities along the road. And there's people living in these villages, but also in familial cattle posts along the road, where primarily most of the livestock are. You'll also notice that there's safari lodges in the southern portion of the study area, and so we have this dichotomy between sort of village lands in the northern portion in NGs 11 and 12, and then wildlife management areas in the southern portion of the study area that are primarily for photographic tourism. In the area, you would expect, right, there's an interaction between people and wildlife, livestock and wildlife, which leads to a significant amount of conflict. There's limited livestock husbandry in the area. Most folks don't utilize herders, and so livestock roam freely during the day, and then they might return back to the cattle post in the evening, where they may be corralled in these traditional style kraals that you may see or bomas referred to other places. In Botswana, they're referred to as kraals. And so these traditional kraals, typically thorn branch structure to them, like you might see in East Africa, and typically referred to as bomas. But they don't often make it into the kraals. They're usually, either they stay out in the bush overnight, or they're outside of the kraal in the village areas and the cattle post areas. So limited livestock husbandry. When we started the project, we were really interested to understand levels of conflict. We started the project right after a year of pretty high level of conflict where people lost a considerable amount of livestock, and based on conversations with the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, we estimate somewhere between 30 and 50% of the lions were killed in retaliation. And so we were trying to understand where are the conflicts happening, what's the levels of the conflict, what species are responsible, and so we would actually go out and do investigations, depredation investigations. We also wanted to understand what local people thought about the conflict, what were their attitudes and perceptions towards lions, towards other carnivores, what were their husbandry practices, and so we did an initial survey when we got there, talking to local people. We also track the lions in the area. We were trying to understand where the lion's moving and what's the population level in the area. So we did some lion monitoring and tracking as well. And we implemented some conflict mitigation strategies. We built 12 of these. We built 12 livestock enclosures that were more robust than the typical methods. And we also implemented a early warning system linked to the lion GPS collar. So when the lions crossed into the village lands or grazing areas, we could send an alert message to people and let them know, make sure your livestock are protected this evening. There's lions in the area. We did follow-up stakeholder survey after this work. So we initiated the work in 2014, did the follow-up surveys in 2016. And so I'm going to share a little of the information from the surveys to focus on today. So we did 200 questionnaires. Most people thought conflict was increasing and that coexistence was not possible. Limited livestock husbandry efforts were confirmed by the surveys, and actually people claim that 10% of their livestock were lost to carnivores. We asked people what their tolerance level was, whether or not they strongly disliked or strongly liked lions on a range, a 5-point Likert scale range, and developed these tolerance scores from -2 to +2, 0 being neutral. And as you can see, people were not thrilled about lions or other predators in the area. Following our mitigation strategies, 36% of farmers received lion alerts, and 70% claimed that they had increased their level of crawling based on our efforts. All the respondents, 80% of the respondents thought that the new crawls that we were developing were better than the traditional methods and thought the lion alerts were beneficial, but most folks still also thought that lions were a problem. Though 50% of them did also claim that our efforts had increased their tolerance. And that's actually confirmed with the numbers. If we run those tolerance scores again after the work we were doing, we did have a significant increase in tolerance for lions and other predators, but people weren't thrilled about having lions close to them still, which makes sense, right? And so coexistence also was able to increase. People were, the folks who believed that coexistence was possible also increased in the area, and the take-home message is that targeted, intensive conflict mitigation strategies can increase tolerance and can increase people's willingness to coexist with carnivores. And so I wanted to thank you all for your time and thank collaborators as well. On the ground, local collaborators, Pro and Chris, and back in the States, Todd and Andrew. Thank you so much. I'll take any questions if there's time, now or later. Thank you.
Okay, quick question, anyone?
Hi, thanks for your talk. To what level did predation diminish, if it did?
So the question was, to what level did predation decrease? So over the course of the study, we were carrying on those depredation investigations, and we observed about over 100 individual losses. So about 116 individual animals were killed and about 102 depredation events. And the take home for us was really more about the implementation of a conflict mitigation strategies and building relationships with the villages and the local stakeholders. And so since my time in the field, the project has been able to continue. Andrew Stein has pushed forward with the work through Claus Conservancy, and they're continuing to monitor those depredation events. We are unfortunately still also losing lions. So this isn't a proper fix, right? I'm certainly not standing up here saying this is the definite answer, but it's a move in the right direction that those tolerance and coexistence numbers were able to increase a bit. We are still losing lions and we are still losing livestock. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thanks, Eric.